Good, e- good evening. My name is Professor 219. You don't need to know my real name. A few of you do. Most of you don't. I like it that way. We have an evening class tonight on how to survive as a conservative in today's messed up America. There's so many things going on right now. Inflation, the price of gas, so many other things that people actually care about. What are we hearing about from the propaganda machine? We're hearing about the January 6th committee. We're hearing about everything except things that people really care about that really impact their lives. Here's something I want to talk about. I've remained silent about it for all of our previous class sessions, but now I'm going to speak out. See, I run a business, and I have some clients who are members of the LGBTQ community, and they've told me to take these videos down. I've started to not care whether I lose their business or not. I really don't. I think I'll more than make up for it from people who appreciate the truth and don't appreciate lies or concealing the truth. Now, here's the topic that I would really like to discuss tonight. The public health risk presented by the LGBTQ lifestyles, plural. There are many lifestyles within the LGBTQ community. Most of them are quite reckless when it comes to public health. When the Republicans take control of Congress in January 2023, we need to pass a new federal law requiring that all schools in the United States and in territories controlled by the United States, from K through 12 and colleges and graduate schools, must teach 1 hour about the public health risks of the LGBTQ lifestyles every Friday afternoon, or federal funding is cut off. Any unit of government, state, county, municipal, that tries to make up this funding loss will also have its federal funding cut off completely. The only thing we'll allow is military bases and ROTC programs on the campuses, because those are essential for national security. Let's take the bull by the horns. May should be designated as LGBTQ Disease Awareness Month. They've had Pride Month in June for many years. We've had pride flags flying from U.S. embassies all over the world, and on federal buildings, and on school buildings, and on state and municipal and county government buildings for many years. But the other side of the story, the other half of the truth, is not being told. It's being deliberately concealed. Let's start with AIDS and hepatitis C. Both of these diseases are incurable. Both of them are inevitably fatal. They are the reason why gay men have a life expectancy of 40. The lifetime costs for the medications for just one of these diseases is $400,000. If you get them both, it's $800,000, and your life expectancy drops to 35. The medical community has been forced to coin a new word to describe this syndrome. It's a syndemic, a synthesis of pandemics. People can have AIDS and hepatitis C at the same time. They can also have syphilis at the same time, and many do, and they're gay. Now, you're never going to recover $400,000 or $800,000 in health insurance premiums from one person who's going to die at the age of 35 or 40. So where does that money come from? It comes from you and me. We subsidize the consequences of their sexual choices with our health insurance premiums, or the health insurance premiums paid by our employers. It's coming out of your pocket, ladies and gentlemen. Another thing, gonorrhea, syphilis, and other ordinary sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, this is from the CDC website. In 2014, 83% of syphilis cases occurred among gay and bisexual men. Now remember, they only make up 1% of the population. Can you say disproportionate? I knew you could. Third, shigellosis, amoebiasis, giardiasis, campylobacteriosis, and other intestinal, bacterial, and parasitic infestations. Okay? These are spread like wildfire by the sexual practices in the LGBTQ community. They are extremely rare among heterosexuals. For example, one study showed that 41% of gay and bisexual men have amoebiasis. The corresponding number in the heterosexual community is 0.01%. They are literally 4,000 times as likely as we are to get this disease. And these diseases will kill you, slow, nasty, and painful, if they spread to your liver or other vital organs of your body. Now, the drugs to treat these are fairly cheap, but the risk is still there. Do you understand? The risk is still there. And when you find one of those rare cases in the heterosexual community, it can usually be traced to, I spent a year as a Peace Corps volunteer in an East African village where the village well was contaminated by raw sewage and animal manure. Now, I'm going to spare you all the nasty details of the sexual practices that spread these diseases. Use your imagination. I did say raw sewage and animal manure. Okay? Now, let's talk about a few other risks of the LGBTQ lifestyles. Rectal foreign bodies, RFBs. They literally shove objects up there. Okay? Emergency room personnel pull these things out on a regular basis. 80% of the patients are gay men or bisexual men, ages 30 to 50, some as old as 90. Okay? The most damaging one that I've heard of was a wine bottle that broke off in there. And it cut the patient worse and worse whenever they tried to pull it out. Emergency surgery was necessary, followed by a strict regimen of antibiotics for an E. coli infection. You can't mess around in there with sharp objects without risking an E. coli infection. Okay? High incidence of homelessness. Gosh, what a surprise. Now, by itself, homelessness isn't so bad, but they can't obey the rules of homeless shelters and other agencies that tend to the homeless. Because they're drug addicts, alcoholics, prostitutes. They sleep around wherever they choose, wherever they can get a moment of privacy, including at the homeless shelter or in a porta potty. Okay, they can't obey the rules of these agencies, so they get kicked out and they're out on the street living in the bush or in a vacant lot behind your home. Okay, they're exposed to frostbite, hypothermia, and sunstroke, heat stroke. They're also exposed to disease vectors such as fleas and ticks and mosquitoes, much more than you and I who actually live indoors. See this house? I live indoors. I have screens on my windows. My cat does not have fleas. They are exposed to these disease vectors and the diseases they carry. Typhus, a medieval disease, and tuberculosis, another communicable disease, reached an incident rate of almost zero, according to the CDC, for about 60 or 70 years in the United States. But there was still some incidents south of the border in Latin America and elsewhere in the world, and these illegal immigrants brought it into us, started living in homeless camps in Southern California, and now both typhus and tuberculosis are the comeback kids in Southern California. There was actually an assistant district attorney in Los Angeles County who got typhus. Okay, this is ridiculous. We should not have to deal with these problems. And regarding frostbite and hypothermia, there isn't a winter that goes by without some city in the upper Midwest, such as Minneapolis or Chicago, right down the street from me, where the police have to come out with a tent and a propane heater to thaw out a dead homeless body so that it can be peeled off the ground and hauled to the coroner's office. How many of those people do you think are gay or bisexual or some other flavor of the LGBTQ community? Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about. An increased risk of domestic violence, drug and alcohol addiction, mental illness, suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts, and predatory criminal behavior such as con artists, robberies, beatings, murders. Generally, the person who victimizes a member of the LGBT community in this manner is another member of the LGBTQ community. Arson. A very famous gay nightclub in central Illinois was burned down, and everybody thought it was a hate crime. And the media, of course, the local TV stations, interviewed former patrons of that establishment and found out they thought it was a hate crime too. And they blamed conservative Christians. Well, guess what? The actual arsonist was the former boyfriend of the male owner of the nightclub. Yeah, that didn't get near as much media coverage. All these pathologies are rare or very rare among straight U.S. citizens, but widespread in the LGBTQ community. Okay? 41% of the gay and bisexual men have amoebiasis, 0.01% or less in the straight community. Okay, even a second grader can do the math. This is ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's continue. My purpose here is to tell the whole truth to people who need to hear it, and nothing but the truth. Okay? There's no prejudice here. Follow the science. That's what we've been told repeatedly by the left, by the media, by the government during this COVID pandemic. Follow the science. Okay? That's just one disease. There are many, many more diseases whose incident rates are astronomically disproportionate. I want every child or college student whose education is anywhere near a federal tax dollar to hear about these diseases every Friday afternoon in the month of May. they have Pride Month in June. We're going to have LGBTQ Disease Awareness Month in May. When I was a kid, the number of people who identified as LGBTQ was around 1%. Now, the current generation in high school says 20%. If we put this curriculum in place, I think that number will drop down to 1% very quickly. If they can have Drag Queen Story Hour in public school libraries, if they can put a book on the shelf called Heather Has Two Mommies, we can do this. And we should. They must be told about this. Even kindergartners. In a kindergarten classroom, they can say, if you love someone who's not the opposite gender, you're more likely to get sick or get hurt or even die. We can create a curriculum that they will understand, and this stuff is very, very easy to understand. Like I said, a second grader can do the math. Let's continue. I take great joy in loudly broadcasting facts that people need to know but are being deliberately concealed for political purposes or any other purpose that is not national security. Okay? Particularly facts about public health. We live in the age of COVID, okay? Governments at all levels, federal, state, county, municipal, have practically forced us at gunpoint to get vaccinated and wear masks to protect us against a public health risk. Okay? It's obvious the government is authorized by the Constitution to take action to combat public health risks. They've rushed these vaccines without adequate testing. The polio vaccine, for example, took 16 years of rigorous clinical trials before it was released to the general public. Okay? They forced us to take these vaccines. You will lose your career, therefore your house, therefore custody of your children, if you don't take this vaccine and every booster they tell you to take. Only then are you considered fully vaccinated and allowed to keep your job. You will not be able to go to school. You will not be able to go to your scheduled court dates even if you're out on bond on felony charges, and you'll be arrested and thrown in jail if you don't show up on time for your court dates. I worked for 15 years for the Public Defender's Office. I know how this works, all right? For all these reasons, the only responsible course of action for any member of the LGBTQ community is celibacy for life. No getting married, no swinging single stuff, no fooling around in the back seat on the way home from the prom, nothing. That is the only responsible course of action. And if we can enforce this with the law in a way that is consistent with the Constitution, we have a duty to do it. The President and the Attorney General and Congress have a duty to do it. That's all for now. I'm going to get back to you real soon about all these other pressing issues, but I thought I'd come clean about this. You have a good night.